The kingdom was alive with music. Drums echoed through the streets. Women danced. Children ran barefoot across the palace grounds, laughing under the bright morning sun. It was the wedding day of Prince George, the only son of King Paul, and beside him stood the woman everyone believed was blessed. Her name was Hilda. She stepped out of the decorated carriage slowly, her heart full of hope. Heavy royal beads rested on her neck. Her dress shone under the sunlight, but her eyes held something softer than pride, humility, people whispered as she walked past. Prince George chose well. She is gentle. She will make a good queen. Hilda greeted the elders by bowing low, even when they told her she was now royalty and did not need to bend. Respect lived naturally inside her. Kindness followed her everywhere. But inside the palace, joy and tension lived together. Queen Jessica sat on her throne with a stiff smile. Her eyes followed Hilda closely, measuring her, judging her, waiting. To the queen, Hilda was not yet a daughter. She was a test, a womb, a future, or a failure. Hilda felt the coldness immediately. On her first night in the palace, the maids whispered instructions to her: how to walk, how to sit, when to speak, when to remain silent. Every movement mattered. Every mistake would be noticed. Hilda listened carefully. She nodded. She thanked them. She wanted to do everything right. Prince George was kind in the beginning. He spoke gently and told her she would be safe. But even in those early days, something felt strange. Whenever children ran past, his smile faded quickly. Whenever Queen Jessica spoke about heirs and lineage, he became quiet. Still, Hilda believed love would grow. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Hilda woke before dawn every day. She greeted elders, supervised meals, and served her husband faithfully. She never complained, even when Queen Jessica corrected her harshly in front of servants. Hilda only bowed her head. At night, when the palace grew quiet, Hilda knelt beside her bed and prayed, "God, let me be enough." She prayed for a child, but more than that, she prayed for acceptance, for belonging, for love that did not depend on her womb. The first year of marriage passed quietly. Each month, Hilda waited with hope. Each month, hope fell again. By the second year, the palace changed. Whispers grew louder. Women spoke behind curtains. Servants watched her differently. Even the guards looked at her with pity. Queen Jessica no longer hid her disappointment. At breakfast one morning, she glanced at Hilda's plate and said sharply, "Eat properly. A weak woman cannot carry a strong heir." At gatherings, she praised other queens who had given birth quickly. Her words carried hidden knives. Hilda endured everything in silence. Secretly, she tried everything: herbs, prayers, fasting, sacred baths at night. Nothing changed. Each month ended with tears. Prince George began to withdraw. He stayed out late. Some nights he did not return at all. When Hilda asked gently if something was wrong, he avoided her eyes. One afternoon, during a gathering of royal women, Queen Jessica's voice cut through the room. "A tree that bears no fruit should not occupy fertile land." The women laughed nervously. Hilda's hands trembled as she poured wine. That night she cried until her pillow was soaked. Days later she overheard palace guards whispering. "The queen has already sent messengers," one said quietly. "To where?" another asked. "To neighboring kingdoms. She wants options." Hilda froze in the shadows. Her heart pounded. That evening she fell to her knees before Prince George. "Please," she begged, "stand with me. Even if I have no child, am I not still your wife?" Prince George said nothing. His silence hurt more than any insult. Soon after the summons came, Hilda was called to the Women's Council Hall, a place where royal women discussed lineage and fertility, a place of judgment. She walked through the long corridor with trembling steps. Inside, elder women sat in a circle. Queen Jessica sat at the head. All eyes turned to Hilda. "Come forward," the queen said coldly. Hilda knelt. 2 years, Queen Jessica said sharply. 2 full years, and this palace has heard no cry of a child from your chambers. Hilda's throat tightened. "Your Majesty, I have prayed." "Silence," the queen snapped. She stood and stepped closer. "You were not brought here for decoration. You were brought here to secure the future of this throne." Hilda's body shook. "Our traditions are clear," the queen continued. A woman who cannot produce an heir weakens the kingdom. Then came the words that shattered everything. I will give you 3 months, Queen Jessica said flatly. If you do not conceive within that time, you will be banished forever. The room gasped. Hilda collapsed forward, tears pouring down her face. Please, I love your son. Give me more time. The Queen's face showed no emotion. Time has already been wasted. That night, Hilda begged Prince George again. They will banish me, she whispered. Please defend me. He turned away. It is tradition, he said quietly. Something inside Hilda broke. The 3 months passed like a storm. She fasted. She prayed. She cried. She begged heaven for mercy. Nothing changed. Then the final morning arrived. Drums thundered across the kingdom. People gathered at the lake, the place of judgment. Hilda walked there barefoot. Her royal jewelry had been removed. She wore plain cloth. Her eyes were hollow from sleepless nights. The entire kingdom watched. Queen Jessica's voice rang out. You have failed this house. You are an empty woman, the crowd murmured. Some laughed, some spat on the ground. Hilda's knees trembled, but she remained standing. From this day forward, the queen declared, you are banished from this land forever. A guard ripped the last royal bracelet from her wrist. Hilda looked toward Prince George. Their eyes met. He turned away. That moment shattered her completely. Drums thundered. She was pushed forward. No mercy, no farewell. Empty woman, voices shouted. Barren, cursed. Tears streamed down her face as she crossed the kingdom's border. She walked until the palace disappeared behind her. Then she collapsed on the ground. Everything was gone. Her title, her home, her dignity. But heaven was not finished with her yet. That night, under the open sky, Hilda whispered through broken sobs, God, if my life still has purpose, don't let this be the end. She did not know it yet. One day, she would return, not as a rejected queen, but as a woman the kingdom would kneel before, and beside her would stand a little boy who would change everything. Night fell slowly over the dry road where Hilda lay. The sky was wide and empty. So was her heart. Her feet were swollen. Her dress was torn. The dust of exile covered her hair and face. For the first time since she became a queen, she slept on the bare ground with no roof above her. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she could not go back. Morning came with a cold wind. Hilda woke with pain in her body and heaviness in her chest. She stood slowly and began walking again. Each step felt heavier than the last. People passed her on the road but did not stop. Some recognized her face. Isn't that the Barren Queen? They sent her away. She brought shame to the palace. Hilda lowered her head and kept walking. By afternoon, hunger burned inside her stomach. She had not eaten since the day before her banishment. She reached a small roadside market and stood quietly near a fruit stall, hoping someone might show kindness. The seller looked at her worn clothes and frowned. No money, no food, he said bluntly. Hilda nodded and stepped away. She sat under a tree nearby, weak and tired. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time she did not cry loudly. Her heart felt too tired for sound. Just as she was about to stand and continue walking, a shadow stopped in front of her. A man's voice spoke gently. Excuse me, are you all right? Hilda looked up slowly. The man standing before her wore simple clothes, like a traveler or a worker. His face was calm. His eyes were kind. He held a small bag of bread and fruit. She tried to wipe her tears quickly. I'm fine, she whispered. But her ice betrayed her. The man sat down a short distance away, careful not to frighten her. You don't look fine, he said softly. Please, eat something. He placed the bread and fruit on the ground between them and moved back. Hilda stared at the food. Hunger and pride fought inside her. Finally, hunger won. She picked up the bread slowly. Thank you, she whispered. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The man did not ask questions. He did not stare at her face with judgment. That alone felt like mercy. After a while, he spoke again. My name is Edward, he said. I work in the city ahead. I saw you sitting here alone. You looked like someone who needed help. Hilda hesitated. My name is Hilda, she replied quietly. Edward nodded, as if he did not recognize the name at all. "Where are you going?" he asked. Hilda stared at the ground. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have no home now." Edward was silent for a moment. Then he said something unexpected. "If you don't mind, you can come to the city with me. I know a small place where you can stay for a few days, just until you find your strength again." Hilda looked at him carefully. She had lost everything. Trust felt dangerous. But there was honesty in his voice, no pity, no mockery, just kindness. She nodded slowly. They walked together toward the city as the sun began to set. The city was not grand like the palace she once knew, but it was alive. People moved quickly. Vendors called out. Children played in narrow streets. It felt real, human. Edward led her to a small but clean house at the edge of the market district. "You can stay here," he said. "I rent this place. It's simple but safe." Hilda stepped inside careful. Lie. The room was small but warm. A bed, a table, a window with soft light. After sleeping on the ground, it felt like a palace. "Thank you," she whispered again, her voice shaking. For the next few days, Hilda rested. She cleaned the house. She cooked simple meals. She insisted on helping, even when Edward told her she could just recover. Edward worked during the day and returned in the evening. He never asked about her past. He never forced conversation. Slowly, Hilda felt her fear begin to loosen. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Edward finally asked gently, "Someone hurt you badly, didn't they?" Hilda's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. He nodded. "You don't have to tell me everything," he said. "Just know, your life is not over." Those words stayed with her. Days turned into weeks. Hilda began helping at a nearby shop, cleaning and organizing. The owner liked her quiet kindness. She worked hard and asked for little. For the first time in months, she felt useful again. Edward watched her from a distance. One night, he returned home earlier than usual. His expression was serious but calm. "Hilda," he said softly, "can we talk?" She sat across from him. He took a deep breath. "I know you are running from something painful. I know someone broke your heart and took your home. But I also see your strength, your kindness, your dignity." Hilda looked confused. Then he said the words she never expected to hear again. "Marry me." She froze. "I don't mean for pity," Edward continued quickly. "And not for rescue. I mean, as a partnership. As a new beginning. I am not a rich man. I am just a worker trying to live honestly. But I promise you this, if you become my wife, you will never be treated as worthless again." Hilda's heart pounded. Memories of the palace, of rejection, of being called empty. "I cannot give you children," she whispered. "That is why I was sent away." Edward's expression did not change. "Then we will build a life without that expectation," he said simply. "A woman's worth is not measured by her womb." Tears filled her eyes again, but these were different. Softer. Hope trembled inside her chest, fragile but real. For the first time since her banishment, someone saw her not as a failure, but as a person. Hilda took a long breath. Then she nodded slowly. "I will marry you." They married quietly the next morning in a small chapel with only 2 witnesses. No crown, no gold, no royal drums. But there was peace. Hilda believed she was starting over. She believed her painful past was finally behind her. She did not know that fate was preparing something she had prayed for, and something that would shake the entire kingdom. Because not long after her simple wedding, Hilda would discover a secret growing inside her. And far away in the palace, Queen Jessica was preparing a new royal wedding. One that would bring a new bride to Prince George, a bride who would soon learn the truth that would destroy everything. Hilda's new life was quiet, simple mornings, warm meals, honest work. For the first time in years, no one watched her with judgment. No one measured her worth. Edward treated her with respect and patience. He never asked for anything she could not give. Hilda slowly learned how to breathe again. Weeks passed after their small wedding. Then one morning, Hilda felt something strange. A deep tiredness, a sudden wave of dizziness. At first she ignored it, but the feeling returned again and again. Edward noticed. "You look pale," he said gently. "We should visit the healer." Hilda hesitated. Fear crept into her chest, but she agreed. The healer examined her quietly. After a long silence, the old woman smiled. "My child," she said softly, "you are carrying life." Hilda froze. "No, that is not possible," she whispered. Tears filled her eyes. She had been called barren, empty, useless, banished for it, but the healer only nodded again. "You are with child." Hilda broke down crying. Years of pain poured out at once. Edward held her carefully, his own eyes shining with shock and joy. Life had given her a miracle. Months passed. Hilda's belly grew. Edward worked harder to prepare for the baby. They lived quietly and happily, far from the palace that once rejected her. Then one rainy night, after long hours of labor, Hilda gave birth to a healthy baby boy. His cry filled the small house like music. Hilda held him against her chest and wept with joy. "My son," she whispered, "you are my proof that God sees everything." They named him Daniel. Years passed peacefully. Daniel grew into a bright, kind child. He had his mother's gentle eyes and a natural grace that made people notice him. Wherever he went, others listened. Even as a small boy, he carried himself with quiet strength. One day, when Daniel was about 6 years old, news spread across the land. King Paul had fallen ill. Prince George had become king, and his new queen had still not given birth to an heir. The palace grew restless. The kingdom whispered. The royal line was in danger. One afternoon, during a royal parade through the city, Hilda and Daniel stood among the crowd. She kept her head covered, not wanting to be recognized. But fate does not hide forever. As the royal carriage passed, Daniel slipped from her hand and ran forward, curious like any child. He stood in the open street before the guards could stop him. The carriage halted. King George looked down in annoyance, then froze. The boy's face, his eyes, his features, they looked exactly like his own childhood portraits. The crowd murmured. Queen Jessica, older now, but still sharp, leaned forward. Her eyes widened in shock. "Bring the boy here," she ordered. Hilda's heart pounded. Fear rushed through her body. She tried to pull Daniel back, but the guards had already lifted him gently. "What is your name?" the queen demanded. "Daniel," the boy answered bravely. "And your mother?" he pointed. Hilda stepped forward slowly, her face trembling. The entire crowd gasped. "The Barren Queen," someone whispered. Queen Jessica stood up in disbelief. "Hilda?" Silence fell over the street. Hilda held her son's hand tightly. She did not kneel. She did not beg. She simply stood with dignity. King George stepped down from the carriage, his face pale. "This child," he whispered, "is mine." The truth hit the kingdom, like thunder. The woman they had banished, the woman they had shamed, the woman they called empty, had given birth to the true heir. Queen Jessica's face collapsed with regret. For the first time, she looked small. "We made a terrible mistake," she said quietly. She stepped toward Hilda. "Please, return to the palace. Your son is the rightful prince. You are the rightful queen." The crowd waited. Hilda looked at T. He palace carriage, at the people who once mocked her, at the man who had stayed silent while she was destroyed. Then she looked at Edward, the man who had stood beside her when she had nothing. She took a deep breath. "My son deserves his truth," she said calmly. "He deserves his name and his future." Then she added softly, "But I will not return as the woman you once broke." The palace later recognized Daniel as royal blood. He was given his rightful place in education. The kingdom celebrated him. But Hilda chose her own path. She visited when necessary. She allowed her son to know his royal family. But she kept her life with Edward, the man who showed her respect when she was nothing. Years later, Daniel grew into a wise young prince. He united both worlds, the palace and the people, and he never forgot his mother's story. On the day he was crowned, he spoke before the entire kingdom. "My mother was called empty," he said, "but she was never empty. She was strong, she was patient, she was faithful. He looked at the crowd. Never judge a person in their season of waiting. Never throw away someone because of what they cannot control. Because the same person you reject today may be the one you kneel before tomorrow. Tears filled many eyes. Queen Jessica cried openly. King George bowed his head in shame and gratitude. Hilda stood quietly beside Edward, her heart finally at peace. She had lost everything once, but life had returned it in a different way, stronger and true. And the kingdom never again called her empty. Moral of the story: never mock someone for what they do not yet have. Time can change everything. True worth is not measured by status, wealth, or children, but by character, patience, and faith.